Steve Gillmor. Some of you who are listening may be able to hear me. To those, the following guests are on the Gillmor Gang today. In New York, John Borthwick. Welcome, John.
Hey, Steve.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent. Robert Scoble, can you hear me? Nod if you can. Okay, Robert Scoble, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me on yet again.
Where are you? Also in New York, Doc Searls. Welcome, Doc. You're muting yourself all of a sudden.
You're right. I was encouraged to mute.
Okay,
I'm back
ahead.
on. You can hear me. I'm here in New York.
And I don't know where Dan Farber is, but it's Dan Farber.
Hey, hi. Good afternoon.
Okay. So we'll bundle up here in California. It's getting almost like living on the East Coast these days. I was in Vegas yesterday, and it was 27 degrees when I got out of the hotel. Robert Scoble, what's going on?
Other than I muted myself. Well, Apple put low-energy Bluetooth radios into all of its stores today. That's one thing. Apple also bought this 3D sensor company called PrimeSense from Israel this week. And that's the same technology that's in the Microsoft Kinect sensor, or similar technology. So we're wondering what Apple is going to do with that. I interviewed this week Occipital, who is using that sensor on the back of the iPad to do all sorts of 3D rendering of objects or rooms. Objects would be great for 3D printer freaks because you could image an object, bring it in your computer, clean it up a little bit, and then print out a copy. And we're wondering what Apple's going to do with that. The consensus online is that Apple's upcoming TV product, i.e. not a TV piece of glass, but a set-top box or a box that hooks up to the TV, will use that sensor in the future to let people do all the same stuff that the Xbox One does right now.
Who says that Apple's coming out with that?
I've seen several people sort of guess that's why Apple bought PrimeSense, and it certainly makes sense. When you see the Xbox Kinect on the Xbox One, you use your hands and to interact with the TV and say no, next, or forward, or something like that. And because these 3D sensors are so sensitive and can see your individual fingers, it lets companies build a new machine-human interface, which is quite interesting.
Doc Searls, what do you find interesting about what Apple's doing or not?
I can't hear you again.
Okay, what can you hear me now?
Yeah, barely.
All right. Just, Doc, please.
It's weird. I think when I mute myself, I mute Steve, and by some miracle of metastasis. What Apple's doing right now is there's nothing interesting. They've come out, they have the usual. I just looked to Robert to tell me what they're going to do next, but I don't think they've done anything interesting in a long time. So, they're just running the world, and they seem to be pretty happy doing that. And there you go.
Dan Farber, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Doc. They haven't done anything radical, but they've just, steady drumbeat of keeping their model working very well, which is they incrementally upgrade, and they really plan for the future well. They don't have to have the greatest features, but you can imagine taking that PrimeSense technology and using it in glasses or other kinds of devices. I'm also curious about Topsy. That seemed like an unusual purchase for Apple. Anybody have any thoughts on that one?
Topsy's the Twitter search engine, right?
Right.
It seemed clear that both Apple and Google are heading into a contextual operating system, and understanding what's going on in the social world is going to be a big piece of that. I don't know where Apple's going to use it, though. I can make some guesses.
It could be a TV product, for example, or iTunes. In other words, being able to mine all that Twitter data and figure out what's popping, what's not, and then inserting those conversations. And
social's going to be important.
It seems a little.
as we move our computing systems from these desktops and laptops and into the mobile, let's say we have a new kind of watch on. And in fact, I have a new Qualcomm watch here that just arrived. I'll show it to you a little later. But let's say I'm wearing that watch and I'm walking around a baseball stadium. They're going to have low energy Bluetooth radios all over that stadium, which are already, so something on the watch or something on my screen, my Apple screen, will change as I walk around the stadium. But what if they could also add on social signals from that location? That would be really pretty cool. You know, if they could tell you who's tweeting within that, you know, the range of that low energy Bluetooth radio, which is usually about 100 meters, but probably less. That would be pretty cool that as you're walking around the stadium, if it shows you something about the stadium, deals from the local vendor, and then social signals from people who are near you. That would be really cool, and that's where I would think that Apple's going to use a technology like Topsy.
John Borthwick, let's hear from you.
So I'm. Can you hear me? Okay, Steve.
Yes,
Yeah.
I can hear everything about what.
So the Topsy acquisition, I was in a sense surprised by, because I think that, and in another sense, not at all. I mean, I think that Apple, like Robert's saying, needs to become a data company. And I think that, you know, when you look at products like Google Now, and you look at some of the data things that Apple's done, you can see that they've got a considerable hold there. And understanding data and understanding social data, I think is really important to a whole set of future products that need to come out of Apple. And, you know, when the Topsy deal was announced, there was a bunch of chatter out there about maybe it's for recommendations in iTunes or improving Genius. I think all of those things, as Dan said, are possible, but I think that what would be more interesting is sort of where it goes 5 steps beyond that. And so I think it's intriguing because they've never understood social. I mean, you remember what was their social, the integrated social play that they embedded into iTunes, went nowhere. I've even forgotten its name.
Ping.
It wasn't Buzz. It was
Ping.
Does anybody remember it?
Ping.
Nope. The Apple Social Network. It was in there. It was in iTunes. And so I think that, you know, they need to start to understand this stuff. I think the in-store iBeacon stuff is really interesting. You know, we've started to, you know, we made an investment in this company called Estimote. We've been starting to build and think about this contextual data cloud that Robert's talked about. And I think that the first order services are going to be like exactly what Apple's doing now. You walk into the store and it helps you do product, you know, information, product discovery, and product checkout. I'm interested in those, but I'm also interested in the next order of effect that comes out of this technology, right? Most of these iBeacons, like with the Estimote beacons, they have little servers on them. They can be updated remotely. They have about 2-year battery life in the case of Estimote, so you don't need to change them that often. And Apple pushing these things in store, I think, will start to get other retailers, other people, you know, start thinking about putting these things into physical space.
Okay,
I think that I think there's a whole bunch of interesting things that are going to come out of that.
I want to segue off of that.
Imagine, you know, if you just, I mean, there's a typical.
I can't hear you
putting
again,
a
Steve.
network into physical space, and each of these beacons will have, you know, a set of controls and a set of properties. And a set of data that they can interact with the other beacons with. And so it's not only what you come in with, it's also how the interaction works between those beacons.
So I interrupt your monologue for the following change of direction. I'm sorry, Robert, just play along at home.
You couldn't hear it?
I can hear you. You can't.
I can't hear
Robert
you.
can't hear
I'm
me
sorry.
for some reason. I've changed batteries, so I have no idea what it is. It may be in the... it's probably Skype. It's Microsoft tormenting me. So, John, I want to switch from what you were talking about to drones and the possibility of rental replacing buying. You know, the drones would not only drop things off but pick them up as well. About?
You cut out at the end, but I'll pick up the drone bait. So I mean, look, I think that the Amazon Bezos stunt last Sunday and through to Monday was played right into the hands of both a sort of a latent meme and mass media's sort of still their lack of understanding of technology. I mean, there was a meme which ran around the internet about 18 months ago, I think, of a French post office. Somebody did a joke that they were delivering with drones, and that was better done than Bezos's delivery of drones. I wish he should have incorporated iBeacon or low power Bluetooth technology into it, right? So the drone should have come down outside of the guy's house and sort of hovered there, and then the guy whips out his phone and could accept the package or reject it, or it could go to his neighbor or something. But I think you asked the question about how that relates to leasing versus buying. Is that right? You think of leasing products or leasing drones?
Well, there was an article on TechCrunch about if you have a drone pick up something that you quote buy, that it becomes a rental or a lease. In other words, the concept of ownership goes away, and I think that there's an interesting question about software. Essentially, there may be an abstraction layer between software and hardware, where the hardware is basically the part that's rented, and that you own the software. You own the connection or the relationship to the software provider.
Right, and that's a really interesting example of where the low power Bluetooth could go, right? Because you could buy a product that had, if the battery life is 2 years now, the cost of these low power Bluetooth and the battery life, it's going to go to 10 years pretty shortly. So you imagine you buy a product, and the product has a data layer associated, which is mapped to ownership over a specific period of time, right?
If I could be heard, yes.
I have no idea. Are you hearing me, Steve?
Yeah, I can. Everything's fine. When Scoble can't hear me, he looks like he's listening. And when I say he can't hear me, then he's smart. He can't.
I can hear you now. I don't know why I couldn't hear you on the previous monologue.
I think the drone just dropped off your channel.
Well, the drones are fun to think about. I met the guys who did the taco copter, and first of all, the FAA is going to shut all this stuff down. But let's say the FAA goes away for a while and doesn't get involved. It just doesn't make sense when you look at the cost of the drone and then the battery life and the delivery distance that a drone can fly. Even a high-end octocopter with a big ass battery. And then it can only take a certain size package. They don't have an answer for how to protect the package on your doorstep. So if I saw a drone fly down the street, I'd just follow the drone, wait for it to drop it off, and then I'd go steal a package, right? They don't have an answer to that. It's just it's just one of those things where you get on national TV and you show something that looks futuristic and you get a lot of PR. And I fell for it. And I had said this when I was falling for it. I said, this is the best PR I've ever seen. The day that the busiest shopping day of the year, Amazon gets on national TV and
you showed Charlie Rose 24 hours before.
What's that?
Yeah, it was 60 Minutes.
I mean, you bait it with Charlie Rose, who's a phenomenal interviewer, but doesn't understand technology that well. And so, I think it was perfectly done.
Yeah, it's really interesting speaking to audiences, particularly even high-end audiences. I just gave a speech to computer science majors in Ireland, in Dublin. And none of them knew what low-energy Bluetooth radios were, even though more than half the audience was carrying one in their pocket.
Right.
And so if a computer science major doesn't know what a low-energy Bluetooth radio is, the normal everyday person has no freaking clue. And that's probably why Jeff Bezos chose to go after drones, because people know what drones are. They've seen them on TV. Low energy Bluetooth, you'd have to spend 5 minutes explaining what it is before you could even explain why it matters. So they went after a visual and drones are very visual. It was the perfect storm of PR.
But I also, Robert, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I also thought it was great because it sort of exposed what not a tech company, what Amazon is. Because it wasn't Bezos like going, you imagine Johnny Ive's cave at Apple as having all these incredibly futuristic and out there sort of wearables and all this stuff. And this is Bezos going into a crappy little conference room, at Amazon and showing off basically an off-the-shelf octocopter with Amazon stickers on it. To Charlie Rose, like that's the secret project that they'd be working on, where it just looked like some PR people had put it together for an hour before.
Yeah,
the video
like
was
every innovation,
the actual
every innovation of the last 30 years in the software business. It looked like a demo.
It looked like a demo, but also, I mean, it's like eBay must have been pretty frustrated because we use what's it called? Is it called eBay Now? The service, I mean, they deliver in Manhattan, they deliver in about, I think it's less than an hour, maybe 30 minutes. And, they use human beings to do that, and it works pretty well.
Dan Farber, you work for CBS. How do you feel about being part of this conspiracy to rob eBay of its living?
Oh, that's funny. Well, I think it's, as everybody was saying, it was opportunistic for CBS to do that, and Charlie didn't get into the weeds or anything, and there was no background like, hey, Amazon is not the first to deliver a package with a drone, etc. So it was a good stunt for Amazon, and the ratings for 60 Minutes on that evening, I think it was 18 million people watched. So it was good for business. It wasn't great for journalism. But I think what we're generally talking about is that there are lots of technologies out there, whether it's low-power Bluetooth or drones or prime sense gestures. There are some companies that are investing in a lot of these technologies to create the future. So if you think about Google with Andy Rubin doing robots, and Apple seeming to buy a bunch of stuff, we don't know exactly what they're going to do with it. It's a question of who can actually harness all this stuff and do, for example, what Apple did with the iPhone, or what Google did with search, and so to me, it's just an exciting and interesting time right now to get to a point where this age of context it feels like more like science fiction today, but it's actually coming. It'll come true. So yeah, the sky's going to be full of drones, tiny little drones, bumblebee drones, doing all kinds of interesting things. And Uber is going to take care of delivering all the packages.
Well, I think that's wonderful, the Uber strategy, because they can move into any possible business from that.
They have infrastructure. They have infrastructure now.
They're going to challenge. It's all these guys, listening to new music in their cars and occasionally paying for it by taking somebody somewhere. It's really an incredible.
Well, if you think about Google and Uber too. So imagine if Uber has all these self-driving cars after Google invested $250 million. And what do they do with all those cars, those self-driving cars, besides take people around? They deliver anything, anytime, anywhere.
But there's still the last 20 feet problem, which is the car can get to my house no problem. But how does the package get from the car to my front doorstep reliably without somebody stealing it?
That's Andy Rubin's robots.
Slingshots.
Yeah, but the robot would still leave it on my front doorstep.
Oh no! These robots have low power Bluetooth, of course.
It still doesn't explain the last 20-foot problem. I think it's talking to lots of Uber drivers and lots of Uber people, they're totally not thinking about packages. Maybe they go there, but the infrastructure that they have is not amenable to carrying a lot of packages. Right by this street, I watch all the Amazon packages go to everybody's house. So I'm actually studying this last 20-foot problem because I get to look out my window and watch it. the average UPS truck or FedEx truck that brings these packages is pretty damn big compared to an Uber car. You're not going to put 50 iPads in a car and deliver it around a neighborhood. It just doesn't make sense, and it's not well thought out from that aspect. I think Uber is a whole nother thing, which is I just spoke in Australia, and everybody in the audience who was all executives had already tried an Uber. So, to think about a company that is 3 years old and has that kind of brand domination around the world is just stunning. So hats off to Travis at executing a company so quickly. But what did he really change? Did he change the car? No. Did he change the distribution system? Not really. What he did was add data on top of the car. So I could see where the car is, and I could see the car owner's rating, and the car can see me. That's all he really did, and that dramatically changed what we thought of as a ride. And that's where I'm going, and why I'm so excited by what John is investing in, because when you put more data on anything, on a retail store or on a museum or on a package delivery service, you fundamentally change it without changing the actual thing that it's doing, driving it around.
Doc is having a conversation with himself in chat instead of talking. We are, modern enabled robots. We have this voice now that Robert has fixed.
I've
his
heard
earphones.
about that. I've heard all about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I want to, order a book and then keep the drone.
Yeah, I think that's the big problem that they're going to have.
That's what I'd like to
The
do.
drone's going to come. They're going to say, "I don't want the book," and they're going to just take the robot.
Exactly. That'd be fun. They'd catch me, but what the hell? It'd be kind of fun.
Almost Human. Has anybody seen that yet?
No, not yet.
It's a Fox. Excuse me. It's a Fox TV series about the future. It's about 20 years from now or 30 years from now. And the strange thing about it is, other than the cars, which don't have any visible means of propulsion, but are in fact regular cars being dragged by wires, it looks identical. It doesn't. There's nothing different about the future. 20 years from now, it's the same, except that half the people are actually robots.
Maybe it's true now, Steve.
And Steve, are they real robots, or are they human beings who have just sort of incorporated a lot of robotic, just embedded robot stuff?
The star is like the $4.2 million man. He's got like a new leg. He's the human star, and then his sidekick is an advanced emotional robot.
Yeah, they're androids.
You've seen this, Dan.
Yeah, I saw a little bit. It's a regular cop show with lots of the usual guns and ammo. But the one thing that I found interesting is they do show some clever user interface ideas. So they did invest some time.
Yeah, it's a Minority Report sort of sampler.
Yeah. So that was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool, but I find it really stunning.
It's a dumb show, but it's some cool stuff.
I find it stunning how little has changed in 2048. I mean, basically, Uber is running the world.
Steve, what do you see? What does everybody see on the call for sort of the best representations of the future? I mean, we're living through a time of incredible change, but the science fiction doesn't seem to be evolving nearly as fast as reality is.
Well, I don't know. I watched Person of Interest, and that's a pretty good show in terms of there's a machine watching you, figuring out who you are, whether you're going to get killed tomorrow or not.
Again, what's new about that?
What's new about that is
for years.
It's finally explaining where this stuff is going. It's hard to be science fiction. Come on, man. I've seen a pill that you swallow and takes pictures of you as you digest it. I mean, that's real. So
right.
why do we need to come up with anything more fantastic than that?
Right.
If I was a science fiction writer, I'd really be like, oh my God, how do I get ahead of this?
I want to do a startup. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the problem with a lot of startups is that they're actually science fiction writers in their pajamas.
This is a prototype watch from. Oh, that's interesting. My camera can't pick up the screen from Qualcomm. With a reflective screen, and low energy Bluetooth, and to your cell phone and everything. To me, this is science fiction, even though I have it in my hand. And how are we going to go further?
That the Samsung watch doesn't do, or the countless other watches that we've seen in 2013.
I don't know. I just got this one, so it just arrived. Amazon, Qualcomm had it delivered through FedEx. One thing they say is this is a prototype, a reference design for Qualcomm to take to other manufacturers say, here's how you could make a watch that does this. They have a new kind of screen that doesn't use very much power, so the battery life is really pretty good on this device. And of course, it has a nice chip in it. Qualcomm makes mobile chips for a lot of the cell phones. It's a nicely designed watch, but I think the market's going to wait for the Apple iWatch, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I just want to give a shout out to a podcast that I've been listening to for about 2 months since John Borthwick pointed me at the one of the founders of this show, a guy named Benedict Evans, and he and a Silicon Valley guy named Ben Baharin, I believe his name. They have a show. I'm sure everybody in the chat room will know where it is, and it's available. And last week they had a guest from. It was about smartwatches, or whatever these things are going to be called, and I find the two hosts to be incredibly compelling and interesting. This is another hour and a half that I don't have that I have to do. It's good to wash the dishes, so that's why I like podcasts. You can stick it in your ear and just go, get something done. But the guest was from, I couldn't quite tell, but it's some sort of a watch company, and the whole
Pebble.
No, it was more specific and less well known. I don't know. I mean, this is a show that you can download in seconds. This podcasting thing, I think it's going to take off. And what was interesting to me is that this guy and that company were coming entirely from the watch as a design, as jewelry. That's their view of the universe. They're not a tech company trying to get into stuff, technology, and alerts and all of that into the phone, into the watch. It's about the reality that there are people, particularly wealthy people, who wear watches. I don't wear a watch and haven't for years.
The wealthy watch thing, because I've actually visited Frank Mueller's watch factory. He makes watches that are $25,000 and up. Anyways, the watch is about signaling to other people that you're a member of a private club, whether you buy a $20 one or others. The person you're talking about is Bill Geiser, the CEO of MetaWatch, which he came from Fossil, which is the largest watch company in the world. Christina, thanks for that in the chat room. And this is where I'm thinking Apple's going to go. This watch does not signal to anybody that I'm cool or part of a special club. The Nike Fuel Band does, because that signals to other people I'm interested in fitness and being sporty. But the Apple one, from what I'm hearing, is about beauty and about fashion. And that the watches so far, the Pebble and this, and even the Fossil watch that Bill Geiser came and showed me, it's not that beautiful. It's not something that my wife wants to wear. And until that point happens, I don't think we're really going to see the evolution of this category.
Well, I want to hear from Doc about this, because it struck me. I mean, obviously the guy's very smart, the MetaWatch guy, and they know what they're talking about. But it seems to me that this is not it's either this or it's either that kind of a discussion. I mean, especially I mean, basically it boiled down to, as far as I could see on this show, was that there's the Apple and Google, and they have tremendous power and market presence. And what they do is going to be very interesting, but it might be more of a niche product, at least according to Benedict Evans, than a major, transformation like the iPhone, the iPad, etc., or the supposed Apple TV. But I just, and then there's this other view, which is we're going to be like Nokia, and we're going to make a really cool phone with a TV camera on it, and we're going to win. And they didn't. And I'm just not so sure that that's what's going to happen. I think that what's going to happen is that these big guys are going to battle each other to a draw over these wearable devices, and then something like this TV show is going to happen, which is we're going to wake up one day and realize that we are surrounded by robots. That it's already happening.
It's an ecosystem issue too. Whether you're Google or Apple, and to me, Apple has some choices. They could make some really fancy watch with all the fine engineering and charge $500, or they could make a $50 watch and sell billions of them because people want a nice fashionable watch that does a few things from Apple. But I think the bigger opportunity is, it's an ecosystem, meaning you have a watch, you have a phone, you have a tablet, and I ultimately think you have something like glasses. Yeah. And Apple, I think, is just waiting for others to experiment, and I'm sure they have a big project going on that they don't talk about.
Go ahead.
Well,
Doc.
I know they have a
hang on a sec, Robert. I want to hear what Doc was trying to say when I was
that's funny because Steve said, "Let's hear what Doc says," and Dan comes now. Steve. Anyway, good stuff in the back channel from Ian Waring. 85% of watch sales are over $500. I didn't know that, but it makes sense. Mark Andreessen said a few years back in an interview that technology trends start with technologists. And I think this is a fashion trend, and it's going to start with fashion. It's going to start with somebody doing something really interesting. There were several watch ideas in Clay Shirky's class last semester that I sat in on, and they were brilliant and also somewhat fashionable and kind of cool. I don't expect Apple or Google to come through with something. I mean, it's possible Apple will, but I think Steve's dead, and it's not going to happen unless he thought of it before he died. Honestly, I think they're going to. I don't look to them for this. I look to somebody else. I'm very curious to look at this podcast and see what happens with it. I think the watch is has been for a long time, an accessory to our bodies that a lot of us use. But I don't know. Robert's showing us something, and what the fuck? I don't care. But my point is that I think there's going to be something truly new and different that's ours. Here's the main thing. The watch is mine. It's not Google's, and it's not Apple's. Even if it says Gucci on it or something, and I'm signaling to somebody else that I've got something cool, it's got to be an instrument of my life, of my intentions, what I'm doing with my calendar. I think the calendar, by the way, is a cool company called VIP Orbit that's done by the same people who did Ask or whatever it was back on DOS and Windows a long time ago. A guy named Mike Muni running it. Yep. I think that's, to me, both Google and Apple have screwed up royally on calendars and contact management.
Everybody's screwed up. Everybody's
screwed up. Yeah. I think that makes it a frontier for somebody else, because I think they're trying to integrate too much else in the world rather than just working for you and me. To me, the watch that's going to succeed is going to be an accessory to my life as a human being who connects with other people and other things in the world. And as long as that we've got Google or Apple doing it, I don't think it's going to happen.
Go ahead, Robert.
Well, I look at the world.
I'm not so. Go ahead.
I look at the world through distribution, and Apple has one attribute that other tech companies don't have. They have these stores, and a lot of people visit these stores. I mean, I did a Gillmor Gang when the iPad was or iPhone was launched, and we watched people streaming into the store.
Yeah, it looked like World War Z, basically.
It was crazy, right? And so Apple has the ability to show people a new product, which Google doesn't really have, and Amazon doesn't have, and Facebook doesn't have, and Samsung doesn't have. And so I look at Apple as the one company that could show you a new thing and get you to buy it. And that's going to be key to watch. And I think Apple's watch can do a lot of what you just said. All of the iPhone users are carrying around a low energy Bluetooth radio, which my watch could see as I get closer to you. It could change color. It could change information. It could say, hey, you're standing next to Doc Searls, and here's, one thing about him that you should know.
Yeah.
And as I walk into an Apple store, my watch is going to change thanks to what just got turned on this week. And when I walk into a Macy's store, they're putting low energy Bluetooth radios in. And when I go to a baseball stadium, they have low energy Bluetooth radios, and my watch can change color to the two teams that are on the field right now. And that is where I'm going. Murray in the chat room says, I don't care about signaling and I don't buy into it. I totally disagree. Anybody who says that is just not rational. When you go to a football stadium, you see everybody wearing the jerseys that they paid $150 to $250 for to signal to other people who they are and who they're identified with. Is just a strong thing in human behavior.
Okay, Dan, you were going to say something?
I was just saying, the watch, provides an easy function, which is you don't have to pull it out of your pocket. So I can go turn the heat up to 72. That's a nice function. So, it can be cute, it can be fashionable, but it has to provide some utility for people that is going to be easier than using your phone or tablet or glass or whatever.
In fact, I have this new Wearable unit, which does home automation, which enables exactly that. It's finally home automation that actually works, and it's sort of affordable. This thing costs, I think, $300, where the previous home automation, I'd have to get somebody in to program my house and do all sorts of stuff. This is really just starting to really take off at a level where normal people can afford it.
I think that both Apple, to disagree with Doc, I think both Apple and Google have enormous opportunity here, because at the end of the day, it may be about design, it may be about jewelry, but that is the end of the pipe, not the beginning of it. What's going to happen, in my opinion, is what's happening with this. I've got this Fitbit thing. It's a watch. You push the button and it tells you what time it is. But
it's not programmed to kill you yet.
No, but there's this whole
surprise.
There's this whole onboarding thing about the data that's behind this thing that is extraordinary, and that is what's going to win. So fundamentally, it's about what are the algorithms, what is the metadata that's being generated and pushed into those systems that's going to come out through the watch and give you some sort of a prioritized view of the world and what's important to you according to what you the whole personal cloud thing that Doc that you've been involved with.
Yeah,
that's part of how this is going to
exactly. I think the.
So I don't agree with you that they bungled it. I think that they've enabled it.
I don't think they've bungled it. I just don't think that, I agree with Robert, by the way, that Apple stores are just a great way to distribute this stuff. I just don't think that they're that creative. I think that, I know, here's what to bet. Everybody's saying it's going to be Apple or it's going to be Google. There's an entire rest of the world out there full of creative people who could do creative stuff, I've looked at John's little Bluetooth things. That just makes me imagine all kinds of amazing shit that can happen. That's not coming from Apple or Google. It's coming from other people. It's just,
when it gets there, it's going to come from
the watch is my instrument. As Dan just said, I want to be able to talk to it and to say, make sure you open the door when I get there. I want to remember to, pick this stuff up at the store. Where's my kid? Am I late for my appointment? What are my obligations? Tell me this, put this on my phone, whatever. I mean, I think that the watch is a hugely potentiated thing, because we haven't seen anything yet that's truly interesting, doesn't mean that anybody's blown it. It just means it hasn't happened yet.
I don't know that we haven't seen anything that's truly interesting. I mean, this is a pretty interesting watch. Just playing with it for the first 5 minutes, it has a touch screen. It has a really beautiful screen. It's fairly well designed. It's fairly smooth. It's fairly small. The battery life is fairly good on it. But Apple is going to watch what Qualcomm and Samsung and others do, and they're going to sit back and really perfect it. That's what they did with the iPad. They weren't first with the tablet PC. I had an NEC Slate, 6 years before the iPad came out.
But Robert, before we get into who's going to win, let's extend this. I want to hear what Borthwick was going to say.
So I have a host of thoughts on this. The first is that I think that Doc used the word hugely potentiate device. I mean, this device is something which you have on your wrist, and it is so much easier than pulling something out of your pocket. So I believe that. I think that we call it a watch because the primary function of this device, which is also Robert, which also is shiny and fairly slim, and it's got cool battery power because I just wind it up. The original, the watch thing was a single purpose device. And I think that science fiction gave us this mythology that we're going to put all of this new stuff into the watch, right? And we were going to sort of talk to our watches, et cetera, et cetera. I think that the point of tension now is that the most interesting thing on the wrist to happen in the last 48 months is the Fitbits and the Nike Fuel Bands, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's amazing that so many of the watch people haven't included the biometric stuff. There's a few exceptions, Basis and who's played around with it a bit, but it's kind of like inferior biometric stuff. So I think that the question of what is the primary purpose of this new device you put on your wrist? Is it a tethered device that is a secondary interface into your phone? That gets into a whole separate set of thoughts.
Which will happen.
As I was listening to you guys, I was thinking about, okay, you've got Apple, who've got an existing business and franchise about getting you to pull out your phone and navigate the apps and use the App Store, et cetera, et cetera. So Apple, in a sense here, have a big reason not to innovate on that primary. They want to turn these secondary devices into devices that hang off the phone as a hub. I think the Google, who have an operating system that they don't actually make any money from, and have yet an app store that they haven't really figured out, maybe have more of a incentive to do interesting things with moving the primary interface away from the phone. Because I think smartphones are, the natural evolution is that they're just a stepping stone to smart wearables and a smart whole bunch of things. I think that this whole question of what is the interface that you are going to control personal computing and your personal data and manage that is still very much. I didn't hear what you said, Steve.
I'm conscious of Robert having not a lot of time left on the show, so I'm just trying to move it along. No, don't shut up. I want to agree with you. I think
I want to hear
what I think this is the intersection of what could be called the reminder economy. In other words, what the watch offers is what Dan showed us earlier, which is that he brought it up to his face and spoke into it. An alarm goes off. I want to watch a certain show. Remind me about that. Not only remind me about it, but I'm at home. Put it on the screen in front of me.
Right, but Dan he showed us.
This becomes a controller for Apple, I think. This becomes the central controller for most of the gestures that integrate the phone, the tablet, and the television set. And I think that's where the money is.
That's one architecture. I think there are other ones possible. Also, I want to know is what Dan really showed us was a piece of jewelry, right? That's what he's actually got on his wrist. So to Robert's point about fashion,
it isn't even a watch.
About design
it is jewelry
and identity. It's like it spoke much more to that.
Okay, Robert.
I don't know how to add any more value here because I think we've covered it pretty well. That we're seeing a new industry show up. I mean, this just showed up today, right? And there are intriguing benefits to it, but Qualcomm is not the company that's going to change culture. They just don't deal with the consumer. So this was built to prove that they could build a watch. And now somebody else has to take this technology and get it in our hands and get us enthusiastic about it. And that's a longer road. And I only see one company that really can do that at scale right now.
Yeah, I tend to think of a watch, and obviously there are different ways to think about it. High and low and middle. I think of a watch in the same way that you would think about an iPod. So we see the iPod is now completely declining in sales, and yet it was a seminal device that did one thing really well. I think you can have a watch and make it relatively inexpensive and have it do a few things really well, which is integrate nicely with the phone and have some voice controls and a few other things, but pretty much get out of the way. Just do a few things really well.
And I think Dan, it has to do one thing really, really well, right? And that's my hunch is that it may be related to the biometric stuff, because I think that a lot of the watches today that I've seen, they do a lot of things not as well as the phone does.
Yeah, I mean, I used to wear watches, and then the iPhone came along, and basically it's a big watch.
But I think if we look at it a little bit differently.
But hang on, let me just finish the point.
Sure.
It was a big watch. I started, then it became a little bit more annoying to have to pull it out of my pocket in order to see what time it was. So it didn't function that well as a watch. But I didn't get a watch until I got into this biometric stuff. All of a sudden, it happens to be kind of convenient as a way of finding out what time it is. It's a little bit more convenient than grabbing my phone. It's certainly more convenient than trying to find. I can see on this iPad Air what time it is. It's about this small at the top of the screen. It's impossible to tell this. This is not a watch either. But once you've got these flows of information coming off of you and into your, orbit, then this is a convenience to have it available to me in something that I don't have to deal with most of the time. I mean, the other Fitbit that I had was a little device which I had to stick in the pocket and clip it on. That becomes more annoying than just having something on your wrist. Once it's on your wrist, a whole market opens up. So I'm agreeing violently with John Borthwick.
Oops.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, maybe the way to look at it is from the point of view of the different tasks you might want to get done. So there's home automation, fitness, health, music, entertainment, personal information. So where does a watch or a device, especially with a smaller screen, intersect with those activities, and then how do you make it work?
A comment from Francine Hardaway. This is a show about first world problems, Laura. Now, I don't know what it is Laura was saying. Laura is criticizing me for my pathetic problems, such as, the phone's too hard to take out of my pocket. That may be true. I mean, this may seem, it just reminds me of what happened with Twitter. Most people thought, this is ludicrous. I don't even know why I'm doing this, let alone why anybody else is doing it. And look at it now. It's completely overcome most of the major cable networks and is on its way to dominating. They just released a script for this Mob City show. They're releasing it on Twitter as a script to market the show. Does that tell us anything?
Yeah.
Okay, so it may seem like a trivialization. I know Laura is not personally attacking me. She's just attacking what I think. So
it's funny that we most things that change the world start in the rich world, and they move out, and I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of living near the Half Moon Bay Ritz and thinking about what the people who go to the Ritz are doing, because those people tend to be ahead of where the rest of the market is. I just met a superintendent of schools in a rural school district in Illinois, and he was telling me, today I can buy a Chromebook for $200, and that's what he's moving to his school districts to. And I'm like, wow, that is just fantastic. Because when I grew up, a similar computer was $3,000, $4,000, and it didn't have the connectivity that a Chromebook has, and it didn't have the screen quality, and it didn't have, all the information services that are behind the cloud available for it. So the world is shifting, and it's shifting very quickly, but it's the rich world that pays for the R&D of this stuff, and then the costs come down and it goes to everybody else.
And Bill Gates became the richest man on the planet by giving us access through scale to technologies that formerly were as big as a house, and that you had to rent time on. So he basically reduced the cost of these devices by the volume of people that could have access to it, and we're seeing the results of that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, John, let's go around the table, and I apologize for wrapping this quickly, but I think that there's something to be said for leaving while we haven't said everything. So, John Borthwick.
Yeah. So I was just gonna add. I mean, this past week, Apple started selling iPhones in partnership with China Mobile, and so I think that you will see a whole lot of people buying 5Cs and some 5Ss in China, and I think that the aspirational fashion, sort of first worldishness of the Apple brand will drive tremendous amount of sales for Apple. I think that so wrapping up. What else? I mean, there's been so much going on this week that we haven't touched on.
Well, Robert, if you want to drop off, go ahead.
I'll stick in here for a couple of minutes.
Okay, good. So relax. Do what you say. Talk about what you want to talk about.
For me or for
Borthwick. I just was trying to. I was trying to manage this to your deadline, and I should never do that.
I'll just be late, like you.
So I think, Steve, I think we're at this transitional point where you're just starting to see all these devices get planted into real space. You're starting to see the wearable stuff become real. You're starting to see the real problems that people want to solve through distributed, sort of moat-based or iBeacon-based or beacon-based, you don't have to brand it, computing just start to become evident. And I think that there's going to be a whole ton of innovation that will move around that. And I agree with Robert that that much of this will be led in the first world. I do think that the second world, third world, and the fact that those markets have grown up as purely cellular markets will mean that there'll be innovation that will start flowing back into the U.S. in really interesting ways. I mean, you could see it's already evident now as we're seeing the massive scale of the messaging platforms move from outside of the U.S. into the U.S., right? I'm talking about text-based messaging platforms. Coming from Asia into the U.S. And
you mean
so
WhatsApp?
I think that we'll start to see that wave moving back in. And I think that will also happen on the device side, because I think in the Chinese market, I think Apple is going to do hugely well, but I also think that there's going to be a lot of local players. You could see already what some of them are doing with stripped down Android phones, and there's really interesting things that are going to pop up. So I think that we're going to see more diversity to the innovation stream than some of this conversation would suggest.
Okay, well, what are you suggesting?
I think it's more than Google and Apple at this game. I think that there's a lot. Those guys have their embedded franchise is going to start to restrict them from doing certain things, and matched with that is just the sheer pace of innovation on the edge. And moving all this data to the edge is going to start creating incredible companies and incredible products. And I think it has the potential to change some of the architecture that we see today as the quote unquote the way things are. Right. So that conversation we had 5-10 minutes ago about sort of is the phone a hub for all of your computing activity as it relates to all of these modes and devices? And I think that's still an open question. I mean, I think that there's a lot more work to be done there.
Dan Farber.
Present.
I can wait.
Oh, you're asking for some.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Well, this conversation just reminds me that there's just a lot of interesting, innovative things going on. It's almost like a little bit of a renaissance. So for people like me who have been around and seen the wheels turn a few times, it's really exciting to be able to see it happen again. That it's not going to be boring, and it's hard to predict, but that's a good thing, and that there's opportunities for lots of people to participate. And I think, as John was saying, a lot of it's not going to happen necessarily in the U.S.
Right. Isn't it amazing, Dan, that, I mean, if you roll back at Gillmor Gangs, I bet there was a couple of hours of Gillmor Gangs that was about the Twitter fire hose.
Years of Gillmor Gangs.
And what would be done with the Twitter fire hose. And, here we are today, and we talked about the Topsy thing for about 3-4 minutes. And there was no sort of consternation about, is Twitter going to cut off Apple off the fire hose, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure if that's because it doesn't matter so much, or if the data is more distributed now, so it's accessible anyway. I don't know exactly why, but I think it's kind of fascinating.
I think it's because they cut off the fire hose to everybody, and there are only about 5 companies that actually have access to it. And one of them is a middle distributor, that allows some of it to come down. But I mean, they killed Track for a reason. They wanted to establish a business. That's what I think.
They paid supposedly $200 million for something, and if it's not the fire hose, then maybe it's maybe they've got their own ideas about how they can take whatever technology that Topsy has and turn it into something vital for their platform.
Don't you think it's similar, John, to the you sold them a TweetDeck? I mean, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it's
isn't
the
that
same
a similar
TweetDeck.
kind of
thing?
thing?
I think that I think actually it's I believe that it's the what Apple really bought, because the fire hose is ultimately a contract, which I'm sure that Apple and Twitter have a good relationship, but Google and Apple used to have a great relationship, right? So these things could change, and they're very dynamic. But I think that what they bought was the ability to pass all that data and produce relevant results and interesting ways of clustering and understanding that data set. So it's really, they bought a set of data science tools, algorithms, a layer on top of the fire hose, because I think the fire hose itself, I mean, it's an interesting question, which we'll never know the answer to, is that if they had made the fire hose totally open, how different would the world look today? And I think that there's one answer, which I'll just say now to be provocative, is that maybe it didn't matter because maybe the sampled fire hose, the sprinkler that they put out, was representative enough of the data set that that all the innovation that was going to happen on top of that data set happened anyway through companies more in the analytics space. But companies like Topsy or companies like Surmise originally did a lot of stuff around trending topics and things like that. So I don't know. It's interesting. We'll never know the answer.
Right. Well, I agree with you. I think that what they gave away for free is good enough for a lot of players, but then they shut down the access above a certain number of customers on the part of their third parties. So, they've been gating this and sort of contouring it to create ownership of the market. The only analogy I was making to TweetDeck was that this seems to me to be them finding the biggest, most effective player at getting access to data by inference that only Twitter actually has. Twitter has all this data.
Well, it could be, for example, if China is going to be Apple's biggest market in the next few years, maybe they bought this platform because they could apply it to WeChat or some other thing.
Well, yeah,
So,
that's a good point. That I hadn't thought of that. But what I am saying is that by giving TweetDeck, which was had sort of dominated that UI, the sort of multiple streams, and basically monitoring the reality that you've created individually around the stream. By owning it basically cuts off the rest of the competition from producing something that would be more effective. And I think that there might be something to the Topsy acquisition in the same manner, which is...
Yeah, but Steve, that would be if Twitter bought it, right? Not if Apple bought it.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Yeah, it was the service, the social service was Ping, and so
Ping, that's right.
Yeah, maybe it was our audio problems, but that's what I kept saying, and you kept saying no.
I thought you said Bing. I was like, no.
Same
Bing
thing.
is the other thing that went nowhere.
Yeah. All right, Doc Searls, you want to summarize a little bit? You have to turn your phone.
I had myself on mute so I wouldn't go clickety-clack while I was on the back channel. Something that's unrelated a little bit, but I think it's interesting, is the other day, Jay Rosen's class and others at the journalism school, graduate journalism school at NYU, met with Vivian Schiller, who's the incoming news VP or director of news or something of news at Twitter, where she's coming from NBC and before that NPR and before that the New York Times and other places. And though it was pretty much off the record and she's not there yet, so she doesn't have much to say, I think we can expect some new and interesting things coming out of Twitter around journalism and supporting journalists. So that's interesting, I think. And it's aside from everything else we've been talking about, but I think it's a space to watch.
It definitely, I couldn't agree more, Doc. I mean, you could see also in the last 24 hours, there's been some chatter on the intertubes about Facebook, both throttling and accelerating the distribution of certain publishers in the newsfeed. And I think that the relationship that news providers have to these feeds is going to be is going to continue to be, but I think only increasingly a point of tension, particularly as the Facebook and Twitter, as they push to monetize, and they want to, sort of in raw sort of advertising terms, they want to keep the eyeballs on the stream versus pushing them out to the underlying content, and what kind of tension, results from that.
Yeah, it will be interesting because I don't know if I'm audible or not, but anyway.
Yes, I can
hear you.
Okay, good. Because the environment into which they're going, both of them are going, is one in which we're all informing each other, right? And there are, on top of that, at the sort of meta layer where all the stuff is being gathered, all the journalists whose readers know more than they do, to quote Steve's brother, and that's the space into which Vivian is going to be trying to haul Twitter. I don't know where Facebook fits on that. I think you're right, John, that there are all these streams that are going to want to monetize the streams, and I guess they'll both find ways of doing that. But for us, the journalists and readers and viewers of the world, it's an interesting prospect because Twitter especially already plays probably the primary role for a great many of us as a news source or as a way to sample the news and look through the news. We're not looking at Google News like we did 2 years ago necessarily. We've got our lists, we've got our We look at the trends going on there. We look at the hashtags, and yet it all feels very primitive to me. I think it's, I think all of both of those companies are prototypical of whatever it is that we're going to do to replace what will have been all of the major news media of the last 100 years. So I think it's a very potentiated time, to borrow the term I used for watches earlier. And how they get monetized is another question. I'm sure they'll find a way. But to me, as somebody who's a very heavy user of Twitter as a source, and not Facebook at all, but as a source of newsy information, I'm encouraged.
Yeah. It's, as you were talking, Doc, I was just thinking of parallels, to the old news system. And, in a sense, you've got the live stream today as an equivalent to the old wire. And then you have, the blogs and the Upworthies or the BuzzFeeds or, just repackaging things at this frenzied pace. Trying to package them up, give them a little bit more context, throw some media around them, and turn them into media. And so if you look how much has changed this year in that space, and you don't even share the personal sharing stuff in there, right? Which you throw in things like Snapchat, and internalize the fact that Snapchat now shares more photographs every day than all of Facebook and all of Instagram combined, right?
Wow.
And there's 28 people who work there.
My daughter was
28 people, right?
Yeah.
And so it's remarkable what you do, what you can do. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we're structured and we do what we do at BetaWorks, but that you could just build that kind of scale with such small teams. And we're living in amazing times.
Robert, anything?
Twitter has really turned a corner for me. I used to really be disappointed at the amount of innovation coming out there, but their new mobile app has really changed my opinion about that. The new Discover tab in the Twitter app, for instance, brings you similar kinds of news filtering that the Facebook newsfeed does, and it's getting to be interesting. It's not yet perfect, but it's a great step in the right direction to turn Twitter into a contextual filter, and I'm quite interested in watching where they go with that. They have so much signal. More signal than any other system that I am on, that if they get this right, that will really be, I think, a significant new tab that I'm going to watch more and more. And I already am. It's bringing me really good stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of diffuse, but all of it's kind of interesting too.
It's very interesting. I gave it a lot of signal, and I'm really working on Twitter now to clean up my feed and get rid of people that I followed that aren't adding a lot of value to my feed. I still have 40,000 inbound, but I'm going through and watching that a lot more every day and getting rid of people who just bring me cat photos, or the metaphorical equivalent thereof. And that's helping that Discover tab also. I'm also going through, and I've picked, around 30 people that I've turned on notifications for. And that's what's showing up in my glass. I assume it'll show up on my watch, and it's showing up on my notifications on my screens on my Android and iPhone devices. And that, too, is making Twitter really, really useful, because if you follow only 20 of the best people in the industry, you'll see all the news in real time. Just following Danny Sullivan, for instance, who's often on the gang, you're going to see a lot of news in real time just by following one person.
Well, he's started curating. At the Boston bombing, he rolled up, live TV streams, the best of what was going on, and he became the editor of the Boston bombing on Twitter. It was extraordinary how effective it was. I just want to call out one thing you just said, Robert, which is I've started cleaning up the notification stream on Twitter, because I have about 150 people, and somehow the nice thing about it is that you can kill the notifications and nobody knows that you've done it. So it's kind of seamless. And today, for the first time, I rarely do this. I did it twice with because they were just very noisy, and hopefully, they'll learn some better practices. But this one guy was so noisy that I killed the notification stream, and then I thought about it, and then I went and killed the follow too. So, I think we're going to start editing our individual streams to deal with this notification moment that we're in. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Not that we're done, but this has been a great show. I want to thank Rackspace, and particularly Rob Legess, without which this show would not be on whatever air this is. I want to thank NewTek, and there is great goodness coming from NewTek. The studio is in two pieces: what we're using today and what we will be using as soon as I read the manual, and all this stuff. All the drones arrive from Amazon and eBay. That's right. We need cables. They're all coming in. I want to thank, along those lines, I want to thank Keith Tier, who I believe is in China this week, for providing us 3 cameras that we'll be using in the new setup. And I want to thank John Borthwick for joining us. Thanks, John.
Thank you. I'm just trying out the new Twitter app.
Now, what does it do new?
The Discovery tab is great, and I'd always just avoided that tab, so it's gotten way better. So I still wish that I could get, I use Tweetbot on the phone, and I wish I could get lists up front, and I could move those buttons on the bottom. But hey, it's getting better, which is neat.
I still don't know what lists are good for, but I know I'm wrong. I just don't understand it.
Well, go to my account, follow, or look at some of my lists, because I have lists of venture capitalists that are separate from lists of press journalists, that are separate from lists of tech executives, and that are separate from other people. And you really get to see how different people react to the news through lists. And I find that very, very valuable, particularly when you bring it into an aggregator like Flipboard.
Well, yeah, and also, look, I mean, if you're short on time, I think that the power of lists and how I use them is I have something I call the short list, which I switch people in and out of, but I have about 10 people I follow there. And if I'm short on time, I just hit that one list and I get a very condensed view, not filtered, but just condensed, or it's filtered by people, but it's just a snapshot of the whole timeline. Well, and that to me is useful.
That goes back to what you were suggesting about the sub feed from Twitter, that it's representative enough of the larger sample that it's useful. And I certainly use notifications in that way, a sort of reduced list. So thanks, John. Thank you, Robert Scoble. Thank you, Doc Searls.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
And, of course, the Dr. Farber.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor. And thanks to the chat room, as always. We'll see you next time. Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who continue to not. Bye.